Welcome to the April meeting of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. We'll start like we always do. Everybody gets a chance on the mic. Let us know your name and where you're coming to us from. And I will start. My name is Pedro Marquez. I'm the Executive Director of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. And I will go to the right this time.
And Tara Lynch, I'm the Associate Director of the Big Hole Watershed Committee.
Ben Laporte, Restoration Programs Manager for the Big Hole Watershed Committee.
John Whittingham, owner of Basic Biological Services.
Jim Griffin, Butte citizen. Jeff Walt, Glenn.
Randy Smith, Glenn.
Diane Hutton, Wisdom.
Jim Keenan, Butte Silverbow Water Utility.
Chris Tribble, Butte Silverbow Wheat Department.
Jim Hagenbarth, a rancher from Glen.
J.M. Peck, a rancher from Melrose. Roger Olson, Assistant Field Manager for the BLM out of Butte.
Diana Morris, rancher from Feely.
Jenna Dolan, Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology. Mary Sutherland, Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology.
Roy Morris, representing Judge
Now Mangles, Glenn.
Art Mangles from Big Hole River Retreat, Glen. Tom Bowler from Butte.
Debbie Bowler, Butte.
I'm Jim Olson with Fish and Wildlife and Parks.
Matt Norberg, DNRC.
Stan Struzik from Wise River.
Pete Camper, Sugar, Wise River.
Tim Fay, Wise River.
I'm Erica Krutap. I'm a professor at Montana Western, and we are in a natural resource conflict resolution class. And learning also about how do you get different stakeholders at the table and host effective meetings. And so the students are coming to observe and learn from you all. So thanks for having us.
Can I say your name?
Tristan Ock,
What's your major?
environmental sustainability. I'm Carson Bart, I'm a business major.
William Stockgrass, Business Administration.
Andrew Paregas, a environmental sustainability major.
Katie Malakany, Ecology.
Brady Fallen, biology major.
Zane Massman, Ecology.
KG, environmental sustainability.
Dylan Vandershaw, ecology major.
Cheyenne Elman, sustainability major.
Abby McLaughlin, Environmental Science and Farm and Ranch. April Thompson, Environmental Science.
Blake Sullivan, environmental sustainability major.
Sam Sturtevant, Environmental Science.
Ty Daniel, ecology major. Gabriel Getty, business major.
Jamie Murdoch, rancher, Glenn.
Caitlin Bourne, Montana DNRC.
Michael Downey, Montana DNRC.
All right, thank you, everybody. Make sure everybody's got their name signed in there on the sign-in sheet. I think it's going to come around again. And let's kick it off with our climate preset report. Caitlin. Thank you, ma'am.
Just for everybody, there's a lot of new people here. I'm Caitlin Bourne. I'm the hydrologist on the Upper Big Hole River, and I do a stream flow and precipitation report every month for the Watershed Committee. I started showing this map. This is just our real-time stream gauge sites and also seasonal sites that DNRC is in charge of. The blue are real-time and the red are seasonal. We are also going to be getting a real-time site at Deep Creek tomorrow, so that's like super exciting. You guys can access this at stage.dnrc. I've got the link up here if you want to access that later. I'll start off with stream flows. This is the Wisdom Bridge hydrograph. Today it's at 328 CFS. Mud Creek is at 1160 today. Maiden Rock is at 1650 CFS. Melrose 1730. Glen is at 1840. Our SWE right now for the Big Hole Watershed is at 69% of median values. You can see clearly where we got those warmer days over the weekend. This was reported out for yesterday, so we didn't get any of the snow that we got last night and today. So hopefully that jumped it up a couple percent. These are the snow total sites that we use for the Big Hole Watershed to calculate the average. And then this is a Hypsomy speed graph to show where the snow is actually based on elevation. So you can see most of the snow right now is around the 6,000 to 8,000 feet mark. Precipitation is 78% of median values right now. This is also from yesterday. Climate outlook from NOAA, we're still in an El Nino advisory, La Nina watch. There's an 83% chance that we're gonna go into ENSO neutral by April through June, and then the odds of La Nina developing are about 62% right now. 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, it kind of looks like above average to near normal maybe. Precip's above average. And then seasonal outlook, this is super subjective because it changes like every week that I look at it. But right now, it looks like we're going to have equal chances to above average temperature for the season, and then equal chances or above average precipitation. Sure. So in the Big Hole, typically El Nino means that it's going to be drier in the watershed, and La Nina is typically wetter. And so neutral means that there's a chance of having either or, but there's also like years that flips it on its head. Is that what? Yeah. And it's based off of temperatures in the ocean. This is our drought monitor currently today. It looks like we are in moderate drought to severe drought. And that just means that for this time period, we are in a drought. And that's all I got. Anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Last year, we had our water level snow for that the same time. Where, how's it compared to last year?
Last year, it was like 98% of normal around this time. We were at 77 last week before the temperatures climbed up a little bit. So definitely less snowpack this spring than compared to last year. Thank you.
Okay. Jump over to my director's report. As soon as we get that pulled up. Thanks you all for entertaining the microphone thing, especially students in the back. One day, maybe 10 to 30% of you will be holding one of these and being in front of a room, so it's good practice. All right, so things that have been on my plate for the last month or so. It always seems like there's a million things, but I'll just sum it up. Administratively, one thing I'm looking at having to do is up our indirect cost rate with our federal grants. It's just sort of had to, with one grant years ago, pick a indirect rate, and I went with a de minimis because I was late writing the grant and I didn't want to calculate it out what it should be. And it turns out that's way low. We use the de minimis 10% and we should be charging a lot more. So I got to just work on getting the right average for indirect costs, getting that into the feds and upping that. So that's long overdue, actually. On the financial front, there's about $90,000 incoming, broken out about 35 and 65 from private and foundation donations that we know are coming, and then project grants that we're waiting on getting paid. Some agencies are working really fast and it's nice and efficient. Other agencies seem to take forever to get the checks out the door. That's just part of the game, part of the waiting game. The conservation fund currently has about $5,700 in it. There's a steady trickle of online donors that just keep dripping contributions in. Most of them are just going to any project They're not specific to a project, but those are just things that we do, you know, online. We did a little post about the last maps that we had, and folks just gobbled them right up and gave us donations, and we sent them out maps. So things like that just keep us chugging and keeps us developing new projects and keeping things going. And then I've been working with the Forest Service on our Elkhorn agreement for that Superfund site. Really just updated contracts with them, but now things are going from design characterization to we're getting into that $500,000 to multi-millions of dollars coming our way, because we're almost done with cost analysis document. That'll turn into a decision notice, then public comment, and then we're raising money to start implementing at the Elkhorn mine. And that's going to be a multi-million-dollar remedy, hauling out about 50,000 cubic yards of dirty dirt and putting it in the hole on the forest and covering that up. So it's getting real, and we just want to make sure that our agreement looks good for us, just as far as liability and things like that. You know, when we take all these projects on, we become the project owners. But I want to make sure that in this document, that just because we're the one hiring the contractors, it doesn't mean that we touch the dirty dirt, now it's ours. Like, it's still the forest's dirty dirt, and it's still the contractor who we hire's liability if something happens, right? So those are some of the things I'm just being cautious about, making sure that we don't find ourselves in a situation down the road. With storage, working on some ideas with the Forest Service and another grant proposal. These are somewhat related here, just looking at opportunities for high meadow storage. This is like low-tech stuff. One of the things I'm curious about, it goes back to a meeting that I led last February, sort of looking at how do you store water in these landscapes? What are the different places that you can do that, and how do you do that? Bureau of Mines had a managed aquifer storage presentation that was really fantastic to see all of the different ways people in the West are capturing abundant spring water and then having access to it later in the year. So there's just a lot of opportunities, a lot of things that have been done in other places. We're trying to get to the point where we can assess which ones to do in which places and compare dollar for dollar, like what are we getting? What's the bang for the buck? You know, so you can send young people up to the high meadows and act like beaver, and you know, you'll get a little bit of saturation of floodplain soils, and that water will trickle down and get to us eventually. But these are like tiny amounts versus some large sort of managed aquifer recharge thing where you're injecting abundant spring water down into the deep aquifer and then pulling it out when you need it. So I've got my head in this space quite a bit, and we'll be poking some proposals out in that direction. It kind of starts with GIS exercises, then it, you know, will go to like a feasibility study. It's slow. You don't fix these things overnight. And then on the outreach front, I was with the Montana Beaver Working Group. I've been a sort of coordinating member of that group since it started, working on the regulatory part, policy and regulatory aspects of beaver-friendly, I guess, beaver-related restoration. I don't want to go too deep into the weeds of it. I did bring up what we learned from our CCAA team about how beaver dams in the wrong places actually stop fish from getting where they need to go. And that was sad news for all the beaver people, but they totally get it. You know, beaver aren't the solution for everything everywhere. But there's ways that we can inform, for example, the county maintenance crews working on the forest. There's ways that we can give them tools to keep the beaver on the landscape and mitigate any damage they're doing to infrastructure. There's a lot of improvements that can be made along those lines. So I stay in communications on all things beaver in Montana. And then 2 articles that I was involved with, getting out, one in Outside Big Sky, that was really talking a lot about our work, trying to avoid the tragedy of the common situation by bringing people together, what we're doing right now and what this organization has been doing for almost 30 years now in this room. And then another article in the Standard that came out just last week, or was it this week, talking about, well, you guys should read it. I won't explain it. Let's just do it that way. Okay. And then, lastly, I want to, well, not lastly, but this book that came out by Jack Lazinski, it's sort of near and dear to me because of all the work I've been doing and we've been doing in Mount Hagen area, but it's a story of the log flume network that they built up there in Mount Hagen, all the infrastructure that was built to transport all the logs out of that area into Anaconda and Butte. It's fascinating. Jack was a Forest Service person for years, and he went back and sort of remapped the whole network. It has a bunch of great stories in there. So you can pick that up at second edition books in Butte or Thrifty Drug in Anaconda, as far as I know. Okay, there's one more slide. And then as far as project updates on my end, I've been working with the Natural Resource Damage Program in Anaconda, Deer Lodge County. Because of our experience on the Mount Hagen uplands, it seemed like a good use of our time and our expertise to help the county determine some alternatives for ecological restoration. Anaconda is going to inherit about $4 million from the NRD program that was left over from the Mount Hagen uplands. So for the students back there, got to bill higher. They had so much money left over in that NRD pot. I didn't charge enough for like 10 years. So they got, I mean, I could have billed more, but they still would have had surplus. That money's going to the county. We're trying to figure out how to spend it. This map is my first look at all the aspen stands and opportunities to do some conifer thinning around the aspen groves of Anaconda. They're obviously like just really beautiful. It's a great asset to the city when you're driving in. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. So I put together an amendment for the county and for the NRD program that's in review right now. We'll kind of keep plugging away at that. I'll keep you posted as that moves forward. And then proposal season is still grinding on. We've got some irrigation projects to get funded. I'm working on these applications. They're due very, very soon. That's just for irrigation, just for headgate fixes. This stuff is really hard to fund because there's no major fish improvement related to it. If there was like a fish issue with these headgates, it'd be much easier to fund the fix, but there's not. So we're trying high meadow storage, kind of that concept. That's like a GIS exercise. We're still working on that. And then the big ones would be our ongoing work on the Pennington Bridge that's getting designed, a big diversion south of Melrose. It's 2 diversions we want to consolidate into one. And Jim's working on some fisheries enhancements there. All of these projects involve, putting in measuring devices also, so that irrigators are measuring their water and they know how much they've got and they know how much they're conserving. That's also part of the drought management game. That's important to us. And I think I'll just stop there. Ben will pick up more on the restoration projects, but that's a little bit of my world for last month. Any questions? Okay. Great, easy. Steering committee. What do we got today? That's
Steering committee has been busy doing the administrative work necessary to accommodate Pedro's proposal to work remotely from Brazil for a year. So that's kept us busy. And other than that, things are going great.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, next up, I think we got Tana.
All right, so we have some fun things coming up in the communications world. Well, let me back up. We've been doing some fun things in the communications world. So I just went to a storytelling workshop at the end of March in Dillon through the High Divide Collaborative, and Laura Tomoff, who made the Big Hole video, the Life in the Land video, put on that storytelling workshop, and it was Really interesting. I learned a lot. And then upcoming, we've got two, well, pay on results articles being written. But the way that works is they'll only be published if major media outlets buy them. So hopefully we'll see those published soon. We also have the Montana Folk Festival coming up July 12th through the 14th, and we will be partnering with Butte Silverbow Water Utility to have a table at that event, where we'll be kind of talking about the connection between the water from the Big Hole and Butte's drinking water, and then ways to conserve water and ways to get involved. So that should be really fun. Hopefully you'll come out and see us at that. And then our Wildlife Speaker Series event, I just finished putting together the details for that. And so we'll be discussing grizzly bears here in the Divide Grange Hall on July 17th, which is the third Wednesday at the event's at 6 o'clock, and we'll be having a meal. It'll be a potluck, but our board member, Brian Wheeler, who's also the executive director of the River Foundation, is donating elk burgers. So that'll be the main dish, and that should be really fun. And we've had several other board members pitch in some money toward it too. So yeah, it should be a good event. I hope a lot of you can come out to that. It will be here. Yep. And then yesterday, I went to a fundraising workshop in Helena put on by the Montana Watershed Coordination Council. And I learned about the importance of monthly donations. So I'm going to be putting some work into promoting our monthly giving program. But basically, monthly donations provide predictable revenue, lower fundraising costs compared to annual donations, and increased donor retention. So donors don't have to remember each year to cut a check. It just comes right out of their bank account. So it's also safe, secure, and convenient. And you don't have to, like I said, you don't have to remember to cut the check. So anyway, if you are an annual donor, or even if you're not a donor at all, but want to become one, we encourage you to consider a monthly donation, and you can set that up through our website. All right, next. All right, and then just a quick wildlife update. So our carcass removal and composting program is in full swing now. We hired an additional driver this year. His name is Justin Cottingham. He lives up in Wisdom. He's doing a great job, really nice guy. And so far this year, we've only picked up 13 carcasses in the Big Hole from 5 producers, but it's my understanding that the upper Big Hole is just kind of getting into the swing of calving. So, and because of the mild winter and nice conditions, they just haven't been having as much loss, which is a good thing. So we'll continue doing that through the end of May, and then we have to return the dump truck to the refuge. And then and these are pictures of our compost site up by Wisdom. So it's the dump truck we borrow for the refuge. That's just what a pile of decaying cows looks like. And then our Upper Big Hole Range Rider program will go July 1st through September 30th again this year, just like it always does with our Range Rider Chet Robertson. He patrols 6 grazing allotments for 7 producers in the Upper Big Hole, looking for livestock condition and predator activity, and trying to help ranchers get reimbursed for losses when livestock are killed by wolves or bears. So, and we're going to try and help Chet get a 4-wheeler this year, because he's been using his for the last 10 years, and he's putting like 10,000 miles on it in the summer, and it's just about ready to fall apart. So that's the main thing that's on the horizon for us this year. But I didn't put a slide about it this time because I talked about it the last few months, but we will have quite a bit of funding coming in this year between America the Beautiful Challenge grant, the RCPP grant, and then 21,000 that we secured from the Livestock Loss Board. And then I'll be putting in some more Livestock Loss Board funding next month. Eric, is your question?
That we fund for individual ranches. So the work we want to bring on is hopefully in areas where we have community driven composting area that money can flow through. Go to ranches and a portion of that can flow into the garbage removal program and keep that in line with the ways.
Okay, great. So yeah, so normally we kind of do it the other way. The money flows into us and then we provide the service. But Derek was saying this RCPP grant that's coming out the NRCS is wanting to fund the producers directly, and then we would set up some arrangement with them to funnel some of that money back to us to cover our costs, so. All right, and the RCPP grant and the America's Beautiful grant are, one of them a 4-year grant, one of them I think is a 5-year grant, so it should set us up pretty well for the next few years. Oh, and we also are doing carcass removal for the Centennial Valley Association in Sage Creek, and then reimburse us for that, for the cost for that program. All right, does anybody have any questions or anything to add about wildlife? That's a good question. So we have a 2-acre. Oh, yeah, sorry. So the question was, what do we do with our compost? So we mostly just use it to restart new compost piles. So the carcasses break down so much that it ends up being not a huge amount of compost left over. And we just reused it. If we ended up with enough that we had to move it, we could just spread it out in the field, kind of behind our compost site. There are some rules about like distributing it or how far from the site you can move it, so. Any other questions? And we've been doing this since 2017, and we haven't had to worry about moving any of the compost off-site yet. All right, hand it over to that.
Right, well, I'll keep my update short and sweet so we can get the weeds folks the optimal time to speak, but it's also just because I've been kind of up to the same thing that I was up to last month, which is a lot of project planning and grant reporting and some grant writing, as Pedro's alluded to with all the grants that we have going on. One of the big grants that we got out this last month was for the Smith Sage Springs Film Project, to highlight the restoration project we did outside of Wisdom last year. It's a wetland restoration project that is very close to sage grouse lek and good habitat for the sage grouse and pronghorn and elk and all the critters out there. So we went, restored the wetland, and I got this filmmaker out to do this awesome documentary about the project. And this grant proposal was to get that filmmaker some more money to continue on with the filming. We do have some money through the Intermountain West joint venture to get the filmmaker and their crew out. So we did some filming last week. Actually, I went out with Vanna on a sage grouse lek site outside of Wisdom, and that was pretty cool. We got some awesome footage of the birds interacting and doing their thing out there. So it's gonna tie really nicely into the film to show how important the work is that we did last year to have that tie into the sage grouse. And the filmmaker is going to go out next or in a couple weeks with Jim McGee to actually start to film on the lek that's close to the Smith Sage Springs site. So knock on wood that we get that grant, because we want to keep that filmmaker, keep them busy with this film project. The other grant that I submitted was this Elkhorn Ranch revegetation and fencing project. I talked about this last month, but I actually submitted it a couple weeks ago, and I'm gonna go and speak about the project and present about the project tomorrow in Helena. So hoping that we come up on top on that one. There's a lot of other applicants for this DEQ 319 funding source, so I'm hoping that we have a competitive project, and this is just a revegetation and riparian fencing project just upstream of Wise River. We're looking at about 1.5 miles of riparian fence and about 1,600 linear feet of revegetation with willow cuttings and stakes, and try to get the shading on the water and to cool off that water in that stretch of the river. Another thing I've been up to is updating our BLM participating agreement. This was signed in 2022. Last year we did another modification on that agreement, but we're up in our game this year, and we're gonna put $300,000 back into the account, and that's all gonna go towards the Eastern Pioneers. A big chunk of this is gonna go towards upland conifer removal, And another chunk of change is going to go towards the low tech work that we've been doing in the area, some mesic restoration, some perennial stream enhancement type work. Some of the chunk of change is going to go to a fish barrier on Rock Creek in the upper Big Hole to protect a non-hybridized West Slope cutthroat trout population up there. So kind of a slew of different projects going to be lumped into it, but I think it's going to be a really cool and positive thing that comes out of this, because I have the same type of agreement with the Forest Service to do upland conifer encroachment work on the forest. When we get this thing inked up, then we're going to be able to do the same amount of work just on BLM. The polygons that have been cleared through the environmental assessment include both the Forest Service and the BLM. So I have 2 agreements with both agencies, and I can get the contract out to give it to the contractor to do work on both sides of the fence. That's kind of the dream. So that has been keeping me busy, and I think by the end of the week, we'll have that kind of wrapped up and put it into BLM's hands. And in that same vein, we started one of the projects that we have funding for already through this agreement, cutting some trees out of some riparian area. This is a unnamed ephemeral drainage of a Trapper Creek, but it's about 10 acres and about half a mile of riparian conifer removal that we're doing. We got YEP with the youth employment program out there cutting trees. They started last week. I went out with them on Monday and cut for like 6 hours, and I was like limping home. I do that every day, but it's good. So that we're about halfway through that project right here, and you can just, this is just an example of what the site looks like. Some bigger Doug firs have encroached in this riparian area, and they're out competing some of the riparian vegetation and biodiversity that we like to see in these riparian areas. So we're just cutting 100 feet on each side of the center line, all of the junipers, and then all of the Doug fir less than 12-inch DBH. So we're leaving some trees in there because there's some big hogs in there, but the DBH is diameter at breast height. So you take your average breast height and wrap your DBH tape around it, and if it's 12 inches in diameter or less, it's getting cut. So that's the first project that we are doing this year with the Big Hole Watershed Committee, kicking off our season. And next month, we'll be kicking off some more projects with our uplands work with NRD outside of Anaconda. And from there, the projects are going to keep rolling, and I'll have some more updates for you in the next couple meetings. Any questions?
You see this Broad Beach fund secured 20,000 for related projects. Does that just go into these projects you're talking about, or are those going to be, well, what's going to happen there?
Yeah, so some of that money is going to go towards beaver conflict mitigation work that we do.
Well,
Other work is going to support Pedro in what he's doing with the beaver working group, and some of the work that Pedro has been doing with the permitting and the Army Corps of Engineers to try to get a lot of these low tech projects funneled through the permitting process in a more streamlined manner, right? Yeah. So, yeah, and then some of that funding with that broad reach fund is going to go towards a high resolution drone flight in a project area that we have in the Highlands of Moose Creek. It's actually been identified with our Forest Service hydrologist partner that it could be a really good reach for some beaver reintroduction. Currently, there's no beaver up there. There's a ton of willow. There's remnant dams everywhere. The habitat is set. There's just no beaver in there right now. The stream is incised. So that's an area that we actually have highlighted to perhaps do some beaver reintroduction. There's some energy behind it, and we're hoping that could be one of the first pilots in this region for moving beaver into the landscape. And this high res drone flight, if we do it at the right time of year before leaves are gone, well, actually, I think we want to do it right after the leaf out, or right after the leaves have dropped in the fall, so we can maybe see where some of these beaver slides were, pick up some of these old dam sites, and key in on where we perhaps can go back in, build some man-made beaver dams, maybe a lodge, and encourage them, once we hopefully get the beaver in there, we can kind of, hey, this is where we should hang out. So that's where some of that money is gonna go.
A quick note on that, on the beaver front that I learned from the working group meeting. So Fish, Wildlife and Parks is working on an environmental analysis for beaver translocation. Currently, with the regs, the way they are, you can't move a beaver from a place where it's a problem to somewhere where it could be a solution. So they're working on writing an EA, and the way it's looking, anywhere inside a Huck 8 watershed, which is the entire big hole, you could pick up a beaver and move it. As long as it's within that watershed, you'll be able to pick it up and move it. It will need the sign off from a FWP biologist, I think, some level. They're still kind of working out those details, but that's kind of the direction that this is headed. And it'll probably, there'll be a sort of public comment period, and then eventually it has to go in front of the commission for approval. We're looking for that somewhere in the late summer, early fall, hopefully. So maybe by the end of the year, we'll be moving beaver. Yeah.
Yes, state policy.
This EA?
What you were currently working on, the working group. I see that Colorado, Utah, and other states are coming up with beaver plan, which I always thought was supposed to be under big wildlife.
Yeah, so if FWP did put out a beaver sort of, what do you call that document? It's a beaver, it kind of is a beaver action plan, I think. Is that what it's called? FWP put something out. It's like a white paper of best management. This is how the state views beaver generally. Here's tools, you know, there's tools out there to manage conflicts and things like that. Yeah.
Proceeds, you know, or conflict, and because landowners and, you know, municipalities are going to be faced with.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a road that's used for, you know, also the ecosystem. We still, despite its current heroic placement, I take issue with it. Although you not all mine and move them somewhere else in the water.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, currently, you know, the way things operate currently is you'd call a trapper and they would file for some sort of if it's outside of the trapping season, right? They have to file for an emergency thing, but there's no, yes, currently there's no compensation.
Is a 100%.
Yeah.
And somebody.
I love the idea, and I'd be happy to take that to the beaver working group. Yeah, because it's, I mean, to be honest, in these conservation, and actually I tell, usually when I have students up on like my project sites, I try to tell them everyone's interested in the ecology and the critters and the animals. And my message is learn to love sniffing out my money, because that's what drives it all, right? So, I mean, our conservation circles tend to overlook things like that, compensation, and because that is real. That's a great idea. It really hasn't come up in the conversations at all. Okay. Okay. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do that. That's a great comment. Yeah.
Yes, you know, not too many years ago, we had quite a bit of controversy in Idaho about the water rights and the use of water in beaver dam analogs and its potential conflict with pre-existing water rights. Did that ever hit the main street in Montana?
Yeah, Montana and Schwen helped put together something, and anyone at DNRC want to talk about this? Okay, Perfect. I will not represent the state of Montana.
Enjoy did not put that together. There's a few of us that did, but you know, credit where credit's due. I don't know, that doesn't matter. Yeah, we put together it's guidance for restoration for wetland. I'm sorry, I'm Michael Downey, DNRC. I'm the drought program coordinator there, but was wearing a little bit different hat at that point and doing more water planning. And the whole restoration, beaver dam analogs, water rights associated with stream restoration had been a big issue for quite a long time. And so this was back, I'm going to say it was 2015, 16, that the division administrator got a group together within the department to kind of hash this out. And so we came up with a set of guidance criteria for stream restoration, which deals with beaver dam analogs. And essentially there's a de minimis amount that can be held back without requirement of a water right. And so for a beaver dam analog structure, that's 0.1 acre feet. That's not a lot of water. But yet, if you go and look at your average beaver pond, that's probably pretty close. So there is guidance out there to deal with that, and that both you know, contractors, consultants they can turn to. It also gives the department when they're evaluating a structure. So yeah, so it has been captured in some restoration guidance that lays all that out.
And I remember it had to do with you're building with natural decomposing materials. The reason I thought of Ann is when we were out, we did some machine-made beaver dam structures, and at the point when you're pushing dirt with a machine and bumping water up that way, then I think you're in a whole another ball game. Is that pretty fair?
You know, and the big thing with these structures is they need to be passing base flow. So passing base flow and not requiring a diversion. And those are the two. That diversion is a big thing when it comes to water rights and whether you need a water right for that project. And also it needs to pass base flow and it's got to be deformable. So that, but you can't go and start building dams in the creek, or that's going to get you in trouble. And I think that it's fair to say with the BDA structures that they pretty well, that they do that. They are passing base flow. There's pitch passage. There's not diversions associated with. So there's definitely some guidelines for what you can and can't do.
Perfect. Yes, sir. Okay. Ben was done, then we got on a beaver tangent. Okay. Yeah.
You're spending all this time and money to take conifers out of the riparian areas where they should not be. Yet you're limited to only they're not cutting anything. If it's over 12 inches, you can't cut it. So that tree just reinfests the riparian area. What the hell is going on?
BLM man right here. You want to help me out with that? Yeah, short answer is we're confined by what they wrote in the NEPA, Jim. So they wrote that up in the environmental assessment, and we're bound to that. Okay, gotcha. Well, that's encouraging. Yeah, right. Yeah. Jim's just telling us that there's a new proposed EA, or what is it, Jim? Programmatic, right?
Yes. And each field office have to issue DNA is what we call it, and decision per project. But the NEPA analysis is primarily done, so I would feature criteria. So it basically just speeds up, PAs can be 2 to 5 year process depending on how, where some of these site specific projects, the time frames could be quite a bit shorter actually within if it meets certain criteria identified in the BLM programmatic.
Our service, we used to cut those big trees when we were doing our enforcement cutting, but we got appealed from a bunch of groups that were concerned that we should have been logging those trees and going to the mill with them. And so there was a lot of concern, and so we ended up writing into those silvicultural prescriptions to leave those larger trees, and it made things go through without appeals.
Yeah, I wonder if we can use that new programmatic to come cut the rest of the 12-inch out, you know. What's really cool about this reach is that we've done 2 years of the enhancement low tech structures in here. So now we've done that, and now we're coming in and complementing that work with the removal of these conifers. Any other questions? Saw there was one out back here. Okay. One of you guys want to explain the difference between El Nino and La Nina?
All right, so we have Danica Holmes with the DNRC on Zoom. I believe she's a water planner. Is that the right title, Danica? Anyway.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Anyway, she just was going to add to the question about water rights and beaver dams, that a water right isn't needed as long as any wetland or floodplain restoration efforts occurring in existing or historic floodplains and wetlands don't exceed their holding capacities. As soon as new diversions are needed or folks are proposing to impound more water than a wetland or floodplain stored historically, that's when water rights requirements would come into play. Thank you, Danica, for adding that.
And let's just stick with Danica. If she's online, we've got additional business. She's doing that, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna try to put a mic up to the computer, Danica, so everyone can hear you. Give us just a second.
Sorry guys, my service has been really spotty all day, but I'm here right now with good service,
Okay.
which is great. Yeah,
Okay, I think we got you.
awesome.
You guys hear that okay?
Can you hear me?
Danica,
Yeah, we can hear.
yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'll say as much as my service allows me to. Is now an okay time to talk about like final decree transition? Is that what we'll go with?
Yeah, totally, exactly. We've got you on the agenda for that.
Awesome. Okay. I don't think it'll take too long, but I'm glad that there is a spot open at the meeting to do so. So I'm the Upper Missouri Water Planner at the DNRC, and I'm so glad. I just got a text from Matt saying he's there. I'm so glad to hear Michael's there. You guys are in such good hands. I am in such good hands with them there. I've been roped into DNRC's comprehensive water review stakeholder working group meetings that have been taking place this year. They really started in earnest at the end of July, beginning of August last year. And this comprehensive water review is really intended to look at some key challenges that DNRC's Water Resources Division is undergoing and looking at in order to revise and really revamp our water policies to reflect more of what our stakeholders want to see happening, or changes that our stakeholders want to see happening. So this year, the two main topics that we're looking at are what will happen after final decrees occur around the state. So our final decree transition, that's our first group, or our first item of conversation, I should say. And then the second is our water planning, growth, and permit exempt well group. So we have a singular sub-working group comprised of 18 different stakeholders that represent a variety of different stakeholders in the state, ranging from engineers and water lawyers and tribes to stock growers and irrigators, cities and towns. And we're about halfway through, just a little over halfway through the stakeholder working group meetings. These meetings are taking place once a month. They are a full day every month. Usually they've been taking place in Montana and Helena, but now we're kind of moving around the rest of the state, the rest of Montana. In January, we held a meeting in Lewistown. February, we had it in Helena, but these last couple months, we've had them in Lewistown, Miles City. Next month, they're in Glasgow. And it's really an opportunity for this singular group to get together and hash out a change to our processes that have been voiced to us that are desperately needed. The goal of which being at the end of it to be a bill to be presented to the legislature in order to actually enact the changes that these stakeholders are discussing. Anyone is welcome to sit in and participate or attend these meetings virtually. All meeting materials are available online for anyone who wants to have a look at what's going on or previous meetings that have taken place. This final decree transition working group that has been convening, really though, from what I understand, is of great importance or of great interest to this group and this region in the Big Hole, because it concerns what's going to happen after the Montana Water Court potentially sunsets. So the Montana Water Court does have a sunset date in the Constitution, and the final decree transition working group is discussing what is going to happen after final decree takes place and potentially presenting a new system, a new court system. Oh, sorry, what was that? I'll pause if there are questions, but I'm so sorry. It's hard for me to hear what's going on too.
You're fine, no questions.
Cool. The overall goal though is to really outline what is going to happen after final decree. After every basin in Montana has undergone final decree and all water rights have been adjudicated, there are two overarching models that are being explored right now as options. There is the division court model, which kind of reflects what's going on now, where the water court is operating on a divisional basis, a basin basis, I should say, where the boundaries of the courts are demarcated on a basin boundary, or a district court model where it is a district court boundary that determines where water right cases are going to be held, I guess I should say. I will say Anna Packenham Stevenson is our division administrator. She was hoping to be here today, but she was held up with a scheduling conflict that she really could not get out of. She's hoping to be able to speak to this group in the next couple of months as her schedule allows. And so my role in these meetings has really been to facilitate them, to aid in making sure that folks who attend online and person have their questions answered. And so I wanted to make sure that I at least brought the fact that these meetings are happening to the attention of this group, and to let you all know that you are welcome and very much encouraged to attend online. I can easily send online attendance information, meeting registration information over to Pedro and Tana so that you all have access to it. But these meetings are so enriched by public participation and public comment and public questions that they really do make our process better and help inform the stakeholders who are in this working group and working very hard to try to come up with a bill that's going to actually make a salient difference in our water policy. So I'm so sorry for how messy this last minute attempt to present on this is, but I'm happy to answer any questions and definitely share the link with the group to register for these meetings, to look at any past meeting materials, meeting recordings. Every single meeting is recorded, and we really do welcome public comment and any questions.
Any questions in the room for the time being? No? Awesome. Danica, thank you. I'm not seeing any questions in the room at the moment, but we'll make sure I get those emails so we can add that link to some of our email updates and newsletter stuff.
Please do. Yeah, we're open to them.
Awesome. Okay,
Thanks, you guys.
absolutely. Thank you so much for making the time. Okay, and then we have one other additional business, and that's Michael Downey wants to give us a brief update on a feasibility study on cloud seeding. So we'll hear from him real quick, and then we'll take a break.
Enough. So share.
I just want to thank Pedro and Tana for letting me sneak in here. I'm going to do this really briefly. I've already talked too much. But really what you could pass those around. Just passing around a couple of brochures on cloud seeding. We've got I think probably this group is more familiar just given the work of Jim Hagenbarth and his probably Jim knows more about cloud seeding than probably anybody here, but they've done a lot of work in Idaho. And there's some statutes that prevented trouble getting any cloud seeding going here in Montana. Cloud seeding programs are widely used really throughout the West. Utah has got a program that's been going on since 1973. California's been doing it since the 60s. How long has Idaho's program been going, Jim? Since 95. And so I think that if you look around the West, it's fair to say that Montana, we're behind when it comes to cloud seeding and even cloud seeding, identifying where it can be done. North Dakota's got a big program. So we finally, after several years of trying to change the law to get it so we can do cloud seeding in Montana unsuccessfully, kind of landed on another strategy and really landed that what we needed to do is to get a pilot program going during this last session, really with the work of Jim and some of the other legislators down here in this corner, got some money to do a feasibility study. And so if you look at there's a couple of flyers. One there is the two flyers that I gave you. One is really poached that from Idaho because I think it does a really good job of going through the issues associated with cloud seeding and the goals and what it's trying to do and how it works. And then the other one is just really addresses more the whole idea of what we need, how we go about identifying places where you can cloud seed. Cloud seeding is not cheap. So you can't just go up there and put out cloud seeders and wait for the storms to roll in and start making snow. In fact, Idaho spends, $3.9 million annually on their program. With that, they produce about 1.2 million acre feet. So there's a lot of money right now going into cloud seeding technology, which has improved a lot for years and years. Nobody really knew it worked. Now we can document that in fact it does work. But that first stage is to go through and find out where we can do it. So the funds that we got were to look in Southwest Montana. We felt like that was the place where it was the most promising, given all the work that's going on both in Idaho and in Wyoming, just over the border on both sides. And so we'll be essentially doing what makes cloud seeding work. I'm trying to do this swiftly and not going down a rabbit hole, is that you've got to have liquid cooled, super cooled liquid water. So it's water that's below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's not frozen. And I was up at Freeze Out the other day looking at the geese, and it was about 18 degrees, and it was all water, and my glasses were covered with water. And it's like, why isn't that water frozen? It's because there's nothing for it to grab onto. So you put silver iodide into the air, and that gives something for that water molecule to grab onto, and it starts to snow. And that's the extremely short version of how cloud seeding works. But there's a lot of questions that people have about cloud seeding. It's like, well, are you just stealing water from your downwind neighbor? And I can say that no, we're not. I don't think that I have time right now to get into all of those details. I will be here through the break and be happy to talk with anybody who wants to know more about cloud seeding. We'll be back in September with some results from this feasibility study. Essentially right now, we're running weather simulation models to try to determine where those drainages are that might be best suited for a cloud seeding project, using Montana Tech's supercomputer to run those simulations. And the outcome of this study will, once we've completed that assessment of the weather simulations in these drainages, is to come out with a preliminary plan for a pilot study and a report that characterizes both the costs and benefits of a cloud seeding project here in the Big Hole. We looked at Southwest Montana and did some preliminary analysis, and the Big Hole had the most potential for storms coming through that would have super cool liquid. So that is the super introduction to this project, and I'd be happy to come down again and talk to you. We are going to be here in September to talk, and I just want to let you know that this was out there, and would be happy to take any questions, or people can call me, read this, and I'll be here hanging around during the group.
Okay. I think just in the interest of time and our weeds presenters, grab him during the break, and we'll take a break right now, and then we'll come back to talk weed control. All right, folks, let's get started. Sorry, we went a little over first round there, but we had a lot to cover. So we'll start with Amber Birch, who is online somewhere, maybe in Canada, but she's with Beaverhead County, and will give us an update on what they're up to first. All right. Amber, you're on.
All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I apologize that I am not there tonight. I think this is the first one I haven't been in person for a lot of years. So I miss you guys, wish I was there. I am actually currently in Shelby, Montana. I was asked to present at a conference in Canada for the Southwest invasive managers or swim team in Alberta. So unfortunately I got double booked, and so that's where I am, but my heart is still in Beaverhead County with you guys down there. So wanted to start tonight just kind of going through kind of what I guess I would see as the weed species of concern in the Big Hole, and if other folks know of some problem areas, then I'd love to know that. Oxeye daisy, of course, especially in the Wise River area, we have lots of oxeye daisy. One of the challenges with that plant is that oxeye daisies, it is pretty, it's a pretty flower. And so we see it in flower beds and those types of things, because people don't understand that it can escape and invade actually really good pasture, riparian areas. It can take over very quickly. Common tansies, we see that one more probably in the Divide area and up through Wise River. Spotted knapweed, of course, is a big one. Most everybody should know spotted knapweed. We do have both Laurinus and the Cyphocleonis bugs on that in a couple of spots that are helping us out. But it is one that we do spray when we're out there. That's one of the main ones we're targeting with herbicide treatments. Hound's tongue. So hound's tongue is another big species that we battle with kind of across Beaverhead County, but also in the Big Hole. I will tell you guys though that the bug that eats it, we can't call it biocontrol because it's still listed as a pest species, but there has been a lot of research done on it here in Canada called Mogollonus crucifer, not in Beaverhead County, but it is along, or we suspect, we haven't confirmed with the biocontrol folks, but at least from the pictures we have sent, it's pretty conclusive that we have Mogollonus just on the other side of the Big Hole River in Butte Silverbow. I imagine we're going to find it on the Beaverhead County side of the river this year. If you're not familiar with that bug, what we're seeing, where it moves into, it decimates hound's tongue. It's pretty dang amazing. There's been quite a bit of research about it the last couple of years to try to get some research and background to get that pest status removed so that then it can be developed more as a biocontrol and can be moved around the state to help battle that species. Yellow toad flax is another one we see a lot of in the Wise River area. There is some biocontrol on it as well that we have put out. Jerry Creek, there's quite a bit. Canada thistle, everybody knows that one. Musk thistle and black henbane are both county listed species. I'm not sure if Butte Silverbow or Madison have those listed. You know, those guys are here tonight, or at least online. So those are listed in Beaverhead County. Leafy spurge. So leafy spurge really starts to become more of an issue in the lower stretches of the Big Hole, but we have started finding, you know, a couple plants here and there more upstream, even around Johnson Creek. There was some plants along the river. That's when we don't want to have really get a foothold and get started out here, because it takes over very quickly, and leafy spurge is tough, very tough. Dalmatian toadflax, we've only had a couple of plants in the Wise River area. So if you know of other areas within the Big Hole that we're seeing, or that you guys are seeing Dalmatian toadflax, it's another one that can be tough to control. So I would like to know where those places are, so we can get ahead of it before it gets to be a problem. So rush skeleton weed is a very high priority in the state of Montana. I think it's a priority 1B species. So the way the priority system works, priority 1, containment, eradication, you know, not in the state or in very limited amounts. Rush skeleton being a 1B. There's more locations around the state, but it's still top priority. Where when we get into knapweed, leafy spurge, those two move to a priority 2. So more of an early detection, rapid response type of a protocol and situation with rush skeleton weed. We have had 3 locations within the Big Hole where we have found rush skeleton weed. Those were all several years ago, and at all 3 sites we're several years into where we haven't had any plants at those locations. So that's very good. But the fear is, you know, what happens when we don't find plants, when it's just a few and they blow up, and then we've got acres and acres. If you don't know what rush skeleton weed is, I would encourage you to look it up, get familiar with it, because it's definitely a super high priority. Ventnata, you may have heard me talk about Ventnata before. Cheatgrass is kind of a hot topic, or, you know, something that a lot of folks are very worried about. Ventnata is essentially the redheaded stepsister of cheatgrass. Cheatgrass early on, at least, animals will graze on it. You can get something out of cheatgrass. Ventnata, it's almost like them just chewing on sand. They will not graze it, and they've actually found if an animal is grazing and there's Ventnata mixed in with, you know, good grass, they'll take a bite. They taste a little bit of that Ventnata, they'll actually spit that bite out and leave the area. So it really impacts a lot of things, both for domestic and wildlife. And then absinthe wormwood is another one that is a county listed species that the majority of it that we have in Beaverhead County is just outside of Wise River in Tie Creek, and then also in the Maiden Rock area. So that's another one to get familiar with as well. Goals and objectives. So our goals for the Big Hole, you know, we want to contain, manage, and reduce noxious weed infestations, Big Hole and Wise River corridors. So that's where we focus a lot of our work with a commercial applicator treating along that 100-foot corridor of those 2 rivers. We want to develop and expand our inventory of noxious weed infestations, increase awareness and support, not only from just seasonal landowners, but from all landowners. Weeds are one of those things that everybody really should be concerned with and aware of. So we want to build those relationships with everybody. We have the annual fundraiser. Everybody knows the Weed Whacker Ball. I'll give you a date here in just a little bit. And then secure additional funds for noxious weed management beyond that 100-foot corridor. So we're always looking to be able to manage outside of just the corridor. In 2023, we held 13 spray days, kind of spread all over the Big Hole from Wisdom. We have some trucks on the Wisdom Day that go down to Jackson. We have a Glen Spray Day, Maiden Rock, several in Wise River. So we kind of try to spread out those days. We treated 326 acres. I don't know why I have treated there twice, but yeah, 326 acres. We looked at those sites of the yellow toadflax biocontrol. Again, the rush skeleton weed places looked really good. We had some resource advisory council funding. So that's through the Forest Service to be able to have crews working along the scenic byway as well as the west and north Big Hole roads. And then EdMaps, if you're not familiar with EdMaps, EdMaps is a mapping tool that you download right to your phone. You can take points and map those species. I actually get an alert in my email that site has been uploaded. So if we find or you suspect rush skeleton weed, you can mark the point, take a picture, and I will get that in my email, and then it will have it on a map for me. I can look at the picture and we can go from there. So then the next picture, these are the points that have been taken along the Big Hole River. So this is that corridor. I think the blue line is about a mile from the river. I can't remember what the buffer that Kara put on it was. So that shows all the points that have been put into EdMaps over the years. And it's updated every year. Plans for 24. So we did secure funding through the Noxious Weed Trust Fund to again have a commercial applicator working along the Big Hole and Wise Rivers. For many years, we've had two different applicators, one that's more on the upper section and one on the lower section. This last year, we did a lot of work and focused more in that Glen and Divide section, which I think was very much needed. And we will plan on expanding from there as well and revisiting some of those problem areas that we had from last year. We had noxious weed education, so private applicators training presented to you guys last year. We do posters and flyers, some mailings. And then at our spray days, we're always willing to answer questions, help with calibration, do a tailgate weed ID. If you need something, those spray days, we're there to help you. So I encourage you to come to those, help us be able to help you better. We'll have some cost share to help support landowners. So if you have a weed project and you need some financial help, we do have some funds through the Weed Whacker Ball to help with that. We'll keep looking at those rush skeleton weed sites. We have those 13 spray days scheduled. And then mark your calendar, September 14th is the Weed Whacker Ball for 2024. Here's a list of the county spray days. I will get those sent to Tana or Pedro so that they can get them out to you guys as well. We'll also have them on our website and our Facebook page. We did get the request to move the date. I believe it was for the Melrose spray day. If I'm remembering right, either Melrose or, yeah, I think it was Melrose. So we moved that kind of a week later. Hopefully that will work better for folks. But if we need to move some dates, the calendar is pretty full. But if I know, hey, can we try something different? We can see what we can do to move stuff around. And then just real quick to end, the Big Hole Basin CWMA held the Weed Whacker Ball this last year. After all of our expenses, we raised approximately $19,000. That was the best year in my history anyway. So I just can't ever stress enough the Wise River community, the folks in the Big Hole, folks from Butte that come down. It's an incredible community that comes together and really does some great things for weed management in the Big Hole. So those of you that came and supported us, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you weren't able to make it this last year, please come join us this next year. The money that's raised at the Weed Whacker Ball stays in the Big Hole. That's how we're able to provide the cost share for landowners We support the Noxious Weed Trust Fund grant and increase the amount of work that's done along the river corridors. And then education is the other component of those funds. So that's all I have. We do have a commercial applicator, or not commercial, a private applicator training. Commercial applicators are invited as well on April 23rd in Dillon at the 4-H building. So if you are needing private applicator credits, you can get those April 23rd. It starts at 8:30. I do ask that folks let me know that they're coming because we're providing lunch. So I'm trying to get a head count. You can get up to 5 credits for your license, 2 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, or you can come all day if you need 5 credits. Just a quick reminder that you do need 6 credits for your license by December of 24. So by this December, you need to have those 6 credits. MSU will be doing some trainings in the fall, and then the new extension agent and Jack will try to work on maybe a 1 or 2 credit for those people that are maybe missing just a credit or 2. So that's all I have, but if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber. Any questions in the room about Beaverhead County? No? Awesome. Thank you, Amber. I'm not seeing
You're
any
welcome.
questions at the moment. Appreciate it. All right, where are we going next? Who's next? Chris, ready? Want to go from there? Great.
Thank you. With the Butte Silverbow Weed Department, we will all go over kind of what our plans are for the year in this area. We will be participating in some of those spray days that Amber mentioned. One is in Melrose, one is in Dewey. There'll be 2 on Fleecer and 1 in Maiden Rock. We will be out on Interstate 15 as we have our MDOT contract, same as every year. We will also be pushing for the Union Pacific to be taking care of their stuff along their property as well. I'll mention that there will be aviators, aerial spraying will be in the area, and that's kind of dependent upon the weather if anybody's interested in that. As far as weeds go, we primarily are out on the highways and stuff are dealing with spotted knapweed and a lot of Horiolism as well. Up in the Highlands area of Soap Gulch, we have a patch of Dalmatian toadflax that we're currently addressing, we're aware of. We also have some Canada thistle and house tongue up in that area. Also, for those that don't know, we have a loaner program for sprayers, free of charge. Anyone can borrow some of our spray equipment within Silverbow County. We do not provide herbicide with that, but we have several large sprayers that can be towed or hauled in the back of a pickup. And also I'll point out that anybody who wants to can come to our monthly weed board meetings for any concerns or questions. They're in the first Tuesday of every month in Butte. And that's about all I have.
Question for review? Helicopter spray. Yes, helicopter is always weather dependent when you use one.
Thank you so much. We're gonna take that back, and we'll get on.
Awesome. Thank you all for coming. Have a good evening. I look forward to giving this mic to one of you one of these days for the duration. Thanks, Chris. All right, as the students make their way out, we'll set up Dale with Madison County. Dale, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Madison County has probably more weeds than Beaverhead County, but we don't have as many species. Our main problem on the upper or on the lower Big Hole is tall buttercup, and it's been a very difficult weed to control because it's out in the field. They have a lot of wild clover in them, and the farmers and ranchers don't want to kill their clover. So we kind of manage it by cutting it as early as we can. And we've had one guy that tried farming on it, and it lasts for 2 or 3 years, and he starts coming back in the swallows, and so it'll just keep spreading again. So it's been tough for us. And then you get down the river a little bit farther, and we run into our leafy spurge, and the foothills down there by the Pennington Bridge, that area there. We have a spray day there every year, and I don't know if we're making progress or not. Some places I think we are, and some we aren't. But it's a never-ending project. The only thing good about spray day is we provide a meal for people participating, and so it's pretty well attended. Then down, well, we have spotted knapweed both up and down, but we don't, that's probably not the biggest amount of weeds we have on the Big Hole River. Then we got some hoary lissom coming in. We're getting quite a bit of that in a few fields, and it's been a tough one to get rid of also. It seems to thrive with the chemical. We try to work with the ranchers to do the best that they can do to keep their noxious weeds under control anyway. I don't know if I'm doing a good enough job, but I'm doing what I think I should be doing on it. I think that this tall buttercup is going to be the biggest one on the Big Hole River as far as trying to get it cleaned up. That's all I have. Any questions?
Got any questions? Nope, not seeing any in the room, Dale. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Appreciate you taking the time to keep us posted.
Well, I'll try to. I probably won't be attending many meetings, but I'll try to Zoom in, try to get it done. Great.
We'd love it. Thank you. All right. Last but not least, Mr. Whittingham. You just give her a wink and she'll change the mind.
I don't need a microphone, believe me.
All right. Yeah, do it for the
audience.
Zoom
I'm
people.
playing loud is so. I'll keep it down and maybe keep you awake. Thanks. I'm owner of Basic Biological Services, and we're a small business in Dillon. We do habitat restoration and mine reclamation, things like that. And invasive species are part of the package deal that we provide for revegetation of disturbed lands. But I wanted to create a controversy because I kind of enjoy irritating some people, and I also knew that there was going to be a big contingent of students from Western, so I tailored this darn presentation for the students. Because I think, science needs controversy, and without controversy, you don't really have good science, and those kids just split. I've got all sorts of students from Western in this show, but we'll just wing it, and I'll try to get you out of here pretty quick.
Sounds like Erica's gonna have a watch.
Okay, good. All right. But do any of you folks remember the seminal book called Should Trees Have Standing? It was an expose
an assortment of essays on whether or not trees have the same rights as people. And it also extended to whether or not, water bodies or other natural resources had constitutional rights. And so for those of us that can remember the 70s, Chris Stone really radicalized the environmental movement by making the claim that yes, natural resources have rights. And then, of course, was the catalyst for quite a large movement in the environmental movement. But willows are the topic that I have today, and many people see them as beneficial to habitat. I was a hydrologist for the BLM for 7 years, and we spent so much time agonizing over species diversity, and age class diversity, and health indices, and all these matrix that quantified willows and how they could be used to determine whether habitat was healthy or functional. And so, one of my ways of irritating some people is saying, well, these people were literally worshiping willows. And we were constantly bouncing around. As a hydrologist, I couldn't understand why repairing wetland function didn't have much to do with hydrology, according to a lot of these folks. But the willows were kind of the dominant indicator of health and function. So we got native species that are beneficial. Willows offer stream bank stabilization, cooling stream temperature, all those benefits. But to some people, especially agricultural producers, willows are not such a wonderful species in that they can be invasive. Obviously, they can be an invasive species. They can be a noxious species because many of them are non-native and invasive. Those are your criteria for a noxious weed. And we're talking about noxious weeds today. They use a lot of water, which is one of the big detriments to their existence. So, and if you're raising grass or other life forms, forbs, then they can displace those life forms and result in diminished values for other beneficial uses. Many of our clients find that the proliferation of weeds is a hindrance to them accessing their property. And so we, as I will show here towards the end of the presentation, we do some really nasty things to willows. And one of my clients in particular, she can't access the property because the bears live down in there. I was confronted by a mountain lion just investigating their property. So she's afraid of the creatures that live in willows. Next.
I was just gonna say that, that predator thing could go on the other side too. You get covered for predators, so that's a good thing.
Well, in her case, she was afraid of her grandchildren going down in there because they had, bear encounters and she couldn't see 10 feet. And
The other thing is fishermen. You get hung up in those.
well, I'll touch on that. But, now don't get me wrong, we've done, tens and tens of projects where we're actually planting willows to benefit the wetland health, the stream health and function. And we look for the most aggressive species, the most weedy-like species. And the both coyote, sandbar, stream bank willow, there's a lot of common names, and yellow willow. So we actually select for those early seral stage species that are most prolific and most ravenous in their colonization of disturbed sites. And then, there truly are some Asian willows that are in Montana, like the Salix alba. And so they're truly noxious in their classification. Crack willow is very common, especially in eastern Montana. And then there are, in fact, 6 states that have listed them as noxious species. So not everybody embraces the idea that willows are just a wonderful species to nurture. And tamarisk, that's a different category, but it is a woody brushy species in riparian areas. Yeah, salt cedar. Well, we're contractors and consultants. We get on the job and 5,000 willow cuttings, that's what they want. Okay, so we got our permit from the DNRC after we bid on the job and we got a checklist of what constituted ethical willow collection. Now, believe me, this was a surprise. Oh, well, my luck. Okay. So, we've already bid on the project and they said, no chainsaws, no vehicle access. You have to selectively cut the willows, can't take more than 30% of any small group. And so there is truly a ethical approach to gathering willows for transplanting, but it really hit our bottom line that we didn't get that protocol in advance. So we're out there with handfuls. Conversely, if there's ethical, there must be unethical. Now, Ben and I work on this project, Garrison's, and this, tree shear didn't turn out to be the best tool for small diameter willows, but I thought, well, this is a contrast. If this is ethical, that's unethical. But isn't that just really a silly paradigm? Okay, next slide. Okay, so they had us dragging willows through the wetlands on sleds. We couldn't go any further than about 200 yards into this was a state land plot. And the encumbrances were enormous. And so again, ethical. Okay, we got to drag them through the brush. We can only cut them with loppers. We can't cut as many as we need. We have to interpret what species are the aggressive species, and we can't use a road that's already there to go gather the willows. Well, if there's ethical, there's unethical. Well, here we are using a tree spade to dig the darn things out, old plants, transport them around mechanically. And so there's a contrast there in terms of how we're implementing our habitat restoration. Next. And you gotta get a lot of willows. Okay, so there's a lot of labor intensive strategies, which is part of my appeal to the students that aren't here, because we need young people that are strong and capable to help us implement this gathering process, right? Next. Then there are the other environmental factors. So we're contracting to do this transplanting. This is Odell Spring Creek over by Ennis. And Ben will enjoy this story, but we were working concurrently on this project and another project for the Big Hole Watershed, where on this site, it went down to -15 on the 30th of October. And on the French Creek site, -22. We were doing seeding over there. The heavy equipment froze to the ground. We had put all these willows in this little backwater area, and that's a 220-pound Marine standing on what, and I'm telling him, well, we gotta get the willows out, right? Because we're under contract and we gotta get this job done in mid-November or your SOL. So things that can go wrong often do. And so next slide. So it's all fun though, right? And this is one of my dear friends, Kim, and Cole Bruha on the left, on the Mahoney side, I believe, another Big Hole Watershed Committee project that we were doing willow cuttings. On the right side is Cole and Ben Laporte on the Garrison property. We're putting enormous amounts of energy into nurturing these willows back to life. It's almost like a midwife type role in life. And you're like feeling really good about all this. Okay, next slide. And very labor intensive. A couple of this, you're like Val Victorian on the far right there. She didn't know that hiring on with us meant, running a auger, planting containerized willows, and that's myself on the Garrison project, another Big Hole Watershed Committee project. And to add to the expense, we're trimming the budded part of the upper part of the willow. So you think of the cost and per stem, the gathering, the nurturing, you soak them. Sometimes you add nutrient solutions to them. You do all this stuff to boost their survival rate. Next slide. Other convoluted two ways of planting willows on stream banks, but that's what the landowner requires. Okay, these are very important plants for the ecosystem, and then shoreline protection on one of our pond projects. Next one. The bottom line is a heck of a lot of investment. Then you build enclosures around the plantings, cha-ching, cost goes up. And my boss on the right is our biologist, and also my wife. She's doing what she does well, directing and managing and telling us how to get our rear ends in gear. So that's just kind of, there's the boss. Next slide. Next. Another big whole watershed committee project. Now, we did not do this willow trenching, but to cost goes up, fairly successful. As I recall, one of the tributaries to maybe Oregon Creek or French Creek. Then there's the West Dine project below Glen on the Big Hole, another Big Hole Watershed Committee project. And we've got really good success on the willow regeneration. Yeah, so we've got some really high levels of success, but it's at a cost. And then there are the benefits. Next. Oh, and those are Western students in that picture, 2 of which we hired partly because they were at that meeting and we talked them into planting willows and all that fun stuff. But the investment doesn't end there. You're protecting the individuals. These are 2 graduates of LRES program, their land resource program, and there's always the follow-up maintenance. So we're taking care of the weeds. So this goes on with continual investment. Next. Okay, what should willows have standing? So we give life. Do we have the power to take it away? So we've done all this investment in nurturing willows, and then a client says, no, go out and kill them all. Okay. And so the end of the story will be the annihilation of willows or enhancing other beneficial uses. So you got mechanical controls and herbicidal controls. I'll run through this quickly. Next. So we've been working for the West Side Canal Company in the Beaverhead Valley for over 20 years on a variety of issues, from legal representation on water rights to just basic canal management and maintenance. And so to the West Side Canal Company, willows are not desirable, and for the reasons we've mentioned. So at this point, we see willows as weeds, as invasive species, and if they're non-native willows, then they would be also eligible to be classified as noxious weeds. But we go out there and obliterate them. And in fact, after we cut them down, in this case, we're rafted up on a shelf of ice. We're doing this in the winter with our excavator, and we came back with follow-up treatment. We sprayed the new growth to kill the willows, not just knock them down, because they're going to grow back with a vengeance. They truly are weedy and invasive and detrimental to water conservation efforts. Next is some of the other adverse effects is line of sight on county roads. And so we got a new machine to cut willows. We sprayed them first. In this case, it's $1 million a day haul road for an international mining company. The haul trucks can't see around corners, so we nuke the willows with herbicidal treatment. They get dry and fragile, and then they are cut very easily. So it not only kills them first, but it also makes the cutting much faster. So we've got chemical treatment, then mechanical treatment. Next. I had to throw this in, it's not willows, but as of yesterday, we were supposed to start burning on the Mill Gulch project. We're working with Southwest Montana Sage Grouse Coalition and DNRC and some landowners. So we've had miles of fire break. They didn't want to spray the sagebrush to kill it, but we just had to build buffers. And I don't think they're going to be burning today, but they may be burning soon, and the concept's the same. Next. And here's a couple examples of landowners who can't get to their property, and their concerns about wildlife that may be detrimental to their grandchildren's health. And so we're spraying the willows, which in this case we're calling weeds. And then we come through with a cutting machine. This is a 100 horsepower track loader, and we're clearing the willows. And I get a lot of flack from my friends and colleagues in the business saying, well, you're destroying habitat. Well, in some ways we are, but we're also enhancing access. We're helping the landowner enjoy their property in the way that the landowners want to enjoy their property. So, next. Three Rivers hired us to go all the way from Sheridan to almost, across the entire East Bench, obliterating every willow that was in the line of their optic fiber cable installation. So there are reasons why willows are problematic. On the right, we've got very large clearing effort where the landowner had lost maybe 30 or 40% of their forage production because the property on the Beaverhead had been in non-use for 30 or 40 years, and the willows had taken over much of their pastures. Next. On the left, those are actually really aspen colony that's deeply infected with either a blight or something. That is just an example of smaller scale mechanical controls. And on the right there is another one of Western's graduates that didn't know what he was getting into, but the owner couldn't fish at his favorite spot. And so he had us go to these targeted areas and, clear enough area for backcasting or, whatever the techniques are. But the owner was not all that favorable having willows grow into his access points and his fishing points. So again, that owner perceived the willows as being a weed species. Next. Oh, and this is one of my favorites, and darn it, Amber, I can't tell you who the landowner is, but, and I think this is still contemporary management, but this particular landowner took a bale buster, which grinds up the round bales and, shreds the, in this case, straw, launches it into the willows, and comes by with a broadcast spray unit and sprays the diesel, which many of us know the diesel was used as a carrier for herbicides back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when they're spraying sagebrush from aerial methods. So it's not that obscure that you would use diesel, but that's his property, that's his choice. And then once he sprays the, fuel diesel mixture onto the willows and the straw, then he lights it. And it actually has worked for about 10 years now, where the burning has been effective on that piece of property. Just a different way of dealing with weeds. In this case, the weeds are willows. Okay. Next, I hate to run through this quickly, and this was to the benefit, most of you guys know all this stuff. Herbicides are mild acids. We've talked about toxicity and toxicology. They're not carcinogenic, most of them, teratogenic or mutagenic. And there are some exceptions, but in general, herbicides are mild acids. Aquatic labeled herbicides, which are generally variations of an existing formulation that just photodegrades and hydrolyzes very quickly, within days. So they can be applied in water, and thus they lend themselves well to willow control in areas that are adjacent to water. And in fact, contrary to what a lot of people believe, there are quite a few products that you can spray right into the water, with EPA's and the state of Montana's approval. And finally, most of the herbicides that you use for willow control do not allow for directly applicating into the water. Next. A lot of verbiage here. This is for people that are not familiar with herbicides. You got to read the label. You need to know the difference between a selective and a non-selective herbicide. Selectives are effective on forbs, for example, but they're not detrimental to grasses. Non-selective are like glyphosate products or Roundup products that kill all life forms, shrubs, forbs, grasses. So if we're gonna use herbicides, foliar applications, in my opinion, are superior for a variety of reasons, but you gotta perform the application during full expression of the foliage. You cover the plant thoroughly, you use the high rates of surfactant. I prefer the methylated seed oils, which are basically cooked off soybean oils or variations of that. really sticky, not quite like smooth creamy peanut butter, but much more viscous than cooking oil. The overspray is inevitable, and we work on canals, which are canals and ditches, which are typically the areas where there is a demand for controlling the willows for water conservation primarily. The cut stump method is used for individual plants and probably not worth discussing at the scale of that type of control. You're dealing with individual plants like Russian olive or large tamarisk or something like that. But I wanted to discuss very briefly the West Side Canal Company. Art Mangles used to own a potato operation, multi-million-dollar potato. And Art told me one day, this is 20 years ago, he said, I am holding you personally responsible for any detrimental effects on my crop. And Art is at the end of the West Side Canal. So you got 42 farm units on the West Side Canal that the water passes by, and it ends at what used to be the Mangles potato. I think it's Arcadia now or something like that. But nonetheless, there are very few products that are compatible with potatoes. And aquatic 2,4-D and aquatic glyphosate are the only two that I legally can apply on the canal. And contractually, I've agreed to only use those products. But potatoes and seed potatoes are used to actually detect to the parts per billion herbicides, and virtually all herbicides, which are mostly carbolic acids, they can be detected by subjecting potatoes to the water in question. And the other interesting aspect is, we get a lot of controversy about, okay, you're going to get some overspray on the willows, when you're treating the banks, and, we have to spray noxious weeds as well. But, have employees that will say, well, this, you're not supposed to spray in the water. But yes, ma'am, you're not supposed to spray in the water, but a little bit's going to get in there and we got to do our job. And they'll look over across the field there and they'll see this 200-gallon plastic tote. And I said, well, for one thing, that 200-gallon tote's hooked up to that pivot and they're chemicating. And they're using the same products that we're using. And, it's going into the aquifer. But the scale of disturbance that you incur when you use these products is very minimal compared to just standard agricultural practices. And I'll go into that real briefly, but the West Side Canal is particularly problematic because there's still a potato growing operation at the end of the canal. And so in no way, no how can I use anything but two different products and not get myself in trouble. Okay, next. This is a bunch of gobbledygook. These are the products that you use for willows in particular. So the industry has refined the chemistries in such a way that certain products are vastly superior for willow control. And I won't go into all the modes of action, but in a very general way, you're interrupting the photosynthetic process. And so by and large, you're preventing the production of amino acids, which inhibits the development of proteins, and the plants starve. So these are I've used everything except the last product, hexazione. And I stick with some of the old school stuff, but there is an incredible selection of products out there if you want to target willows specifically because you think they're a weedy species. Next. But boy, I'd love to talk about this a little bit more, but do you think that herbicides that are used along the Big Hole River are applied in areas with highly permeable substrate and shallow water tables? Okay. So we need to be aware of that. And we need to understand the contradictions in law and practical application. And so if you follow these issues, groundwater contamination, surface water contamination, you're going to realize that the labels themselves don't give you really good guidance. They say things like, do not apply where water tables are shallow. And I have asked the Department of Agriculture so many times, what do you consider a shallow water tank? Oh, one that's kind of close to the ground surface. You can't get a straight answer. How close can you spray to the water body without having some risk of surface water runoff, carrying that long-lived herbicide into the water body? And then if you think, okay, all the detritus that comes off of dead plants, and you've got a product that lives 60 or 90 days, that detritus from the dead plants is going to get carried into the water body. So there's a lot of nuances there if one's really concerned about contaminating water and complying with the law, given that the ambiguities are enormous. And so I have a lot of empathy. I'm an applicator myself. These other applicators, commercial or governmental, they have a pretty substantial risk because it isn't very clear cut on what's appropriate use of what could be potentially dangerous products. And if you are interested, the Headwaters Inc. versus the Talent Ditch District, this was the seminal case where environmental advocacy group sued irrigation district claiming that they were out of compliance with their non-point source discharge elimination laws. And it set precedents across the United States on what constituted legal use of herbicides in irrigation systems. I'd love to talk about that a little more thoroughly, but I think we're out of time. But if you're wanting to see the Ninth Circuit Court could not be more hostile to this particular type of litigation than anywhere else in the country. So irrigators in particular run a higher risk of scrutiny in the illegal arena, not to mention just the practical use of herbicides in the waters of the US. Next. I think we're done. Thank you for your patience. Okay.
Gotta go, right? Okay.
Did I offend anybody? Oh, okay. Yeah, well, we renegotiated the contract. Because it wasn't just the willows frozen into the ice, the entire wetland complex was frozen to about 12, 14 inches, and the planting of cuttings was impossible. Yeah, and so the landowner was compassionate. Let's just put it that way, and we picked up where we left off the following spring. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I can't wait to visit next year.
Yeah.
That was a lot of info. Yeah, I wish we could talk about a lot of that. Thanks you all. Next month, we will have our fisheries update. Should be a doozy. Cross your fingers for some good fish counts. And we can leave the tables and chairs. We'll reconfigure them, but we're basically good. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks, Zoom folks.